Now that you know how to create our first Angular 2 application, let's take a moment to understand the files and folder structure that was created by Angular CLI. Let's go to Visual Studio Code and open our Angular CLI project. It's important to take a note of this directory structure and the location of files because the application that the Angular CLI generates follows the recommended app structure and the style guide. While you may not need to understand each of these configuration files and these folders in detail, it's good to know what they are and why we need them. We'll start with tslint.json. tslint checks your TypeScript code for readability, maintainability, and functionality errors. This tslint.json file is used to configure which rules should run. readme.md is a markdown file for this project. readme.md is used to generate the HTML summary of our project. This is similar to what you see at the bottom of most GitHub projects. It contains information about various commands that can be used to build, run, and test this project with Angular CLI. This might come in handy as a quick reference when you have just started with Angular CLI. As you can see, there are some commands here like ngserve, ngbuild, nggenerateComponent, and so on. So we can make use of this particular file to quickly take a look at what are the different types of commands that are available in Angular 2 CLI. Protractor is an end-to-end test framework for Angular applications. Protractor runs tests against your application running in a real browser, interacting with it as a user would. Protractor needs two files to run, a spec file and a configuration file. The protractor.conf.js file contains the configuration information to run these tests. A package.json file identifies npm package dependencies for the project. Package.json file includes two sets of packages, dependencies and dev dependencies. Dependencies are essential to run the application, whereas dev dependencies are only needed while we develop the application. So we can exclude dev dependencies from the production installations. The next file that we are going to look at is the karma configuration file. Karma is a JavaScript test runner created by the Angular team. Karma needs to know about the project in order to test it, and this is done via this karma configuration file. Angular-cli.json file contains configuration related to its functioning, like what is the root folder, where to save the out files, which is the default index file, and so on. Git ignore is useful if you are using Git for version control. This file specifies intentionally untracked files that Git should ignore. Editorconfig file is used to define and maintain consistent coding styles. The majority of our application is under the source folder, and this is where we will be working most of the time. You might create multiple folders under the app folder, like this one already created, which is called shared. You might create multiple folders like a home folder or an about folder for your components. Angular CLI has created a root component for us, which is the app.component.ts file. Each component may have its own HTML and the CSS file, and that is what they are. The app.component.spec.ts is the spec file for testing your component. app.module.ts file is our root module. We'll discuss more about what and why we need our root component and root modules in the later sections. Index.ts is a barrel module. A barrel is a way to roll up exports from several modules into a single convenience module. So here, instead of importing both app.component and app.module, we can now just import this barrel. Assets is where you want to keep your application assets like images, fonts, and so on. The environment folder consists of two environment files, one for dev and one for production. The list of which environment maps to which file can be found in the angular-cli.json file, which is here. So here, as we can see, the environment.ts and the environment.prod.ts files are actually mapped to dev and production accordingly. favicon.ico is a favicon, also known as shortcut icon or a bookmark icon, is a file containing one or more small icons associated with this particular website. Index.html is your main HTML file. And then the next in line is main.ts. Main.ts file is used to tell Angular to start up our application. This code initializes the platform that our application runs in. In this case, it's a browser. And so it uses the platform browser dynamic to bootstrap our app module. We'll see more about this when we write our first component. The next in line is a polyfill.ts file. Polyfill is a browser fallback that is made in JavaScript. It allows functionality you would expect in a modern browser to work in older browsers, like for example, Canvas. Canvas is an HTML5 feature, but if you want to make it available in an older browser, then you make use of polyfills. Polyfills.ts file here is used to list the features that you want to be available. Styles.css file is used to add global styles and also to import other style files. Test.ts is used to initialize the Angular testing environment. tsconfig.json defines how the TypeScript compiler generates JavaScript from the project's files. This file contains options and flags that guide the compiler as it generates the JavaScript files. Typings is a simple way to manage and install TypeScript definitions. typings.d.ts file is a typings reference file. Now that we have looked at all the files that are in our root folder and also the files that are part of our source folder, let's understand what node_modules are. When we create an application using Angular CLI, it automatically downloads all the dependencies and saves them into this particular folder. Angular CLI basically reads the package.json file in the current directory and installs all the package's dependencies into this node_modules folder. And finally, we have E2E folder, which stands for end-to-end testing. This folder consists of the spec and configuration files related to end-to-end testing using Protractor. Every project is different, and you may not be using all of these configuration files in your projects, but it's good to know what they are and why we need them.